Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us.
So welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Socializing Security. My name is Milu, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Milu.
We are both, I think, running at 10,000 miles a minute lately, and so, it's been really great to just make the time for these sessions. And I have been pretty busy building out a business lately, and so I know we're going to talk about that on some other episodes, and I'm excited to do that. But the other day I found myself, for some reason, couldn't sleep, and there's so much weight that we have about this digital footprint. And this stuff keeps me up at night, right? Because I'm a compliance and security professional, this stuff actually does keep me up at night because I know I'm not doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. Over Christmas break, I was cleaning out all my passwords and making sure that those were in a better place and doing the things that I know that I'm supposed to be doing with my personal data as opposed to corporate data, right? We're talking, there's personal security concerns, and then there's obviously, of course, your work security. And we're all regulated a little bit differently at work, right? Because we don't want to get in trouble for doing something wrong by our employer. We don't want to be the person that caused the thing that is in the news, ultimately. I do actually think we don't, as people, focus enough about our personal security, and I'm part of the problem here too. I'm actively trying to learn to do better. Brian, I think you do a lot better with your personal security and your IT setup than I do, so I definitely could stand to learn from you on this area, and so I'm looking forward to those discussions we're going to have. But the other day, it's basically 3 a.m, and what was I ending up doing was cleaning up my digital footprint on a platform that I think we're all familiar with, used to have a little bird, and we'll have decided that maybe we don't want to participate in that platform anymore, or do I really want, messages, I'll call them, from years ago being held against me in some way that I didn't anticipate because context has changed or something, right? Like a message that I might have written when I was in college or starting out, it might just be different now. And context has changed so much. So today we're going to talk about the idea of your digital footprint and just start talking about some of the concern areas that Brian and I both, as experts in our respective fields, think about and how we might start having conversations around those in future episodes.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic I think about a lot and have been thinking about a lot more lately. The more you get into how cyber criminals do their thing, the more it kind of raises warning flags on the things that you do day in and day out. So, as I started learning more about social engineering, I started realizing, that's pretty scary that they don't really need much. You're told to protect your social security number. We all know we need to protect that, and that just gets harder and harder all the time. So it becomes a thing where, I think about my address, my home address, as much as I think about my social security number. I think about my credit card in much the same way I'm starting to think about even my cell phone number, because those are things that by themselves may not be enough to do something malicious against you, but are things that combined with other things, they're in the chain of items that that can be used to abuse or steal your identity or whatever. And of course, as a parent, I think about these things a lot with my kids too, and not wanting to, because these are things that my parents didn't have to think about. I was online as a teenager, but it wasn't anything like it is now. And there were so few people on back then when I was a teenager that it was everybody wasn't really. I mean, the criminal activity hadn't really started up, I guess, is the blunt way to put that.
Yeah, well, again, the idea of data, right, and the things that we're concerned about, which is sensitive personal information or identifiable information, the areas that we're concerned about as people, it's changing very rapidly. And so because technology is changing very rapidly, so things that might have made sense 10 years ago just might not make sense anymore from a data exposure perspective and really like with privacy concerns. So again, even with the advent of social media, the intention, right, was to connect people in a remote world and create this wonderful network of your old colleagues and your old friends. And it's, Facebook started as like to just network with college people. Like, and now we could never imagine a world really without Meta and what that looks like. But you're seeing Meta all over the news, right? And some really interesting digital footprint kind of concerns because they're ultimately tied to data privacy concerns for children or for victims of horrific things that we are seeing on the internet in terms of like adult materials and people using intimate images against people in their like work lives. And how many times a day do you see somebody on your social media sites being like, hey, my account was hacked? Or even on LinkedIn, yep. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'll see something. Or so the idea of a digital footprint, right? Even something like LinkedIn, where we see this as this wonderful platform to network with professionals and to get a job and to meet other people in your industry or learn from professionals. I think there's huge value to it. But like the second that an employee is like, hey, I'm so excited, I got this new job at XYZ company, and the whole network is like amazing. Unfortunately, there are malicious actors that are scraping that and then hitting companies with social engineering, specifically like CEO phishing attacks immediately, like within an hour of that post. Not even, I think it might even be sooner than that. I think I personally have seen one within 10 minutes where I could see the post on my LinkedIn page.
I just recently started a new job and had a somewhat public search for a job. Got caught up in layoffs and all that. And as far as I know, no one by the name Brian Knudsen has ever worked at this company. And it wasn't a week before I was getting spam messages from random places. And I can only imagine that somebody was smart enough to say, oh, this person with this name works for this company, and this company uses this email template for identifying their emails. Let's just start spray and pray. Let's see if we can get a hit. So they're using multiple sites. Again, not malicious. Not any information I would have shared that by itself was bad, but taken together with other data points can be used in things. And one of the things I fear with my kids, and not that it's ever really bitten me personally, but the fact that stuff is all out there forever. It's just a screenshot away. Like nothing. You think about things like revenge porn, and that's one of those things that I look at and I'm like, yeah, there's no safe way to share intimate details like that digitally, because all it takes is a screenshot. Snapchat's a big thing for sharing that kind of content in a safe person-to-person manner, and I've got nothing against that. But that doesn't mean that while it's designed to be a short-term existence, it displays on the screen longer than it takes me to push the key combination to take a screenshot, which means now I've got a digital copy of that can be permanent and that someone could use maliciously.
It's backing up to whatever cloud backup you're using instantly, right? Even if you think that you're taking an intimate photo on your device, if you have like iCloud or Google Photos backed up, it's suddenly like it's gone, and you can't take it back, unfortunately. Like at that point, you took that photo. If you have those things linking, because it's really convenient, right? If you're not home and you want to pull up a photo and you don't want your phone storage to be totally full, it's super convenient to be like, oh, let me pull my photos from like iCloud or Google Photos. But if you're using that for intimate photos, that means it's already in those cloud spaces.
Yep. And that's, so many of the things that we use these days are designed to be that convenient and that easy to use. And, at the same time, those of us in the IT space, like, back everything up. Everything should be backed up. You need to back it up. Did you back it up? Did you back it up twice? Did you back it up 3 times? Did you put it in some place that nobody can ever touch it or change it? Like, those are things that we have beaten to our heads in the business world. But when it comes to the personal side, we also have to remember that not everything that we back up, we don't necessarily back up everything at work. So having an exception policy to backing things up, because it's more dangerous to keep it than it is to allow it to go away. There's space for that in our personal lives as well, but unfortunately we're at this point where we made it convenient to never lose photos, so therefore every photo, every screenshot, everything you download gets moved to at least one other place and stored, and that's the one piece that you'll never be able to get rid of because it has value to somebody else that may want to do you harm.
Yeah. The intention behind data retention, especially when you think about the everyday person, they actually do like stuff like cloud storage for their photos because if there's a fire, right, you want to be able to, those are the things that are irreplaceable. Those pictures are the things that people, would say that if their house was on fire, they're like, I want the photos. I'm sure there are other things as well, but like a lot of those things are like, I want my wedding album, especially for older generations who didn't have the digital copies, right? Like I'm lucky a lot of my stuff from my wedding was completely digital. So I haven't even gotten my photo album yet. It's been years. So, but I can look at them and, I have a digital frame. And so, those things like would live on forever. But some of those, the physical things that we're talking about, then potentially like putting into cloud storage is part of the digital footprint that we're talking about. So it's not just like your passwords and your names. It goes beyond what we're considering like sensitive PII, like your social security number. It's, I'm starting to think about, well, could any images or social media posts that I like be held against me? And I don't love that because the intention is to be like, oh, I like this thing. It was like a funny thing or a joke. But now it's starting to be like, shoot, in 5 years from now, if I liked that video, could that be held against me in some way?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, digital literacy is so important. And unfortunately, it's not one of those things that gets taught at school. Even we still struggle with the basic things about how to manage finances. And here we're adding yet another layer that makes it 3 times more complex. Like, how do you manage your finances in a digital world? That's tough. Like, I think we've touched on it before, and we'll definitely go deeper into it. But if you go to some website that has this random thing that you want to get that you may not be able to find anywhere else. So for me, for example, I've been playing with LEDs a lot in electronics, and yeah, I could buy those on Amazon, but they're a heck of a lot cheaper, and I'm closer to the supplier, and I'm supporting a smaller business if I buy it from, a smaller LED supplier. And I look at those sites, and I'm like, should I trust them with my credit card? Is this a place that is going to lose it? I mean, of course, I'm looking to make sure that it's secured with HTTPS and all that kind of stuff. I look for the things that they've been certified by PCI and things like that. But generally, I will lean to PayPal because now I don't have to give them any of my real information. There's a token that gets passed on the back end, and none of my real information gets passed to them because who knows what they're going to do with it. Who knows if they may get hacked someday and that information gets released out into the wild. So, it's a little bit rambly there, but these are the things that run through my head. So it's a little bit of a stream of consciousness, if you will, of how to think about these things and where you're sharing your digital information, where it could potentially go, and how even a trusted source sometimes can't be trusted.
Yeah, and I don't love it because I know we've had the conversation, right, that like me paying my property taxes turned into this whole thing because I was so concerned that I was paying the money the wrong place that it started to feel like debilitating, which is like not the point. Like I just had to pay a bill, and that's where then it starts to be like, okay, there's certain risks you tolerate in your personal life, right, over your business life, right? That's exactly why we are riskier in our personal lives. Like, why is it that we're so much more trusting with our personal data than we are with corporate data? And it's because we've been trained to do that. And I'm hopeful with us having conversations here in this forum, especially where we start to bring in experts in other fields where you and I are going to continue to learn alongside the audience about things like children's privacy and cryptocurrency regulation and the things that we might have an idea about because of the worlds that we work in and live in. But the consumer experience right now is like not great from a data privacy perspective. The other day, I'm actually like, I had my personal privacy completely exposed by a bank. Like, and I've shared this story before. I also had the thing where like I had a nurse expose my very sensitive health information on a phone call in front of a neighbor, when there are things in place like HIPAA that protect patients from not like having their health information shared in front of parties if it's not the right time. And I'm trained in telling people this stuff, right? Like I advocate for people in this space. This is my job. And how is it that it's still happening to me? And then I'm super frustrated because I'm like, man, like on that call, right? Like with a medical service provider, I was put in a position, a really uncomfortable, where I was like, hey, I need an appointment, but you know, I can't talk right now. You're on speakerphone. I'm driving a neighbor. You know, I really can't take the call right now. Could I call back? And then they're basically like asked a very pointed question that exposed that now my whole like neighborhood is like, I think probably gossiping about my health information because of where I live, which
Yeah.
I love it, but it's fine. They're all wonderful people, so it's no big deal. But it could have been a really big deal. Like, what if I had been in the car with my boss and they had said something that maybe would make my employer think differently about me or whatever, you know, like, or a family member who you're not that close with. Like, now I'm like, oh, wow, I can never pick up the phone on speaker with a health provider. Like, I've learned that lesson.
Yeah.
And the same thing, like, I had a bank share my entire social security number, all 9 digits. In email,
and that's
unencrypted, and you're like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, and that's very much why, you know, be careful even when you trust the person, that, you know, you can't always, and it doesn't have to be because the other person is going to do something dumb with it. It could simply be because, like I said, a hacker could get in and get that information if they store it somewhere. You know, which makes me think about the 23andMe situation. And how they got hacked, and I don't know that we fully know all the information that got leaked through that, but that's one of those things. It's like, is there anything more intimate than your DNA? Yeah, I don't. Fortunately, I have made the decision up to this point to not do any of that genetic testing. So my information, that level of information, is not out there for me, at least not on my reconnaissance. That's not to say somebody
Unless
didn't
your
take.
family members did it though.
Well, and there is a situation where I know of a family member that did do it. So some percentage of my DNA record is out there, which, you know, 50% is, you know, could be enough, like if your parents did it. So that's a situation where I've, you know, even before I really got deep into cybersecurity, I would think about it and I would be like, I'm really into genealogy, and really want that information to be able to connect to people. But I'm like, I don't know what these companies are going to do with that data. I don't want it out there. I don't necessarily want other people to know it. The way technology is moving, we may have cloning technology in 20 years, and you know, you may just need to know the DNA record of somebody, and you may be able to clone them, and like that scares the bejeebus out of me. Because who knows what happens at that point? We're already facing the situation of deep fakes and AI being good enough to fool people pretty effectively. So who knows if they can replicate it in the physical space as well as the digital space. I have to think about the fact that maybe we will be there within my lifetime still, which I don't know. I feel like I'm being a downer at this point, but it's kind of hard not to.
I'll pick it up a little bit on the sunnier side, because the ultimate intention is that what one of my goals is as a compliance practitioner and a security person, is that I am hopeful that people trust me enough that I can help them do better, because collectively we're all not doing enough, especially because it's really, really draining. It's, you know, it's the fact that in the middle of the night, that's when I'm like, oh, I can't sleep. Oh, maybe I should finally clean up things that I just no longer serve me, right? Like there wasn't anything touchy in it, but it was just like, I don't really want to be affiliated with this particular platform anymore, and made that decision because that was the best decision for me. That doesn't mean that, like, you know, if people are still on that platform, I'm like, great, good for you. Like, I really don't feel one way or the other. It just was no longer serving me. But even the intention of how hard it is to then erase that digital footprint, it took 3 clicks per thing. And so luckily there are services now that can help you do that. But then again, you're adding another third-party service into your data. And do you trust them? And it starts to feel a little bit debilitating. But I will say a lot of the things is that we do have rights for these things. And so I would always encourage, as like a friendly friend, not as an attorney or anything like that, but like actually like understanding the security settings of the tooling that you're using, and potentially trying to like play the game of how little information can I give these people to get the thing that I need. Because unfortunately, that's the world that we live in now, because it's sad to me with things such as like genetic testing. For certain people who have autoimmune disorders or like long lasting illnesses, having genetic testing could be hugely valuable to their personal health. But on the other hand, if that suddenly, that data could get into the wrong hands, and then could mean that like insurance providers don't want to cover you because they know your entire family history and the lineage. And that sucks. And so we do, as consumers, really need to start holding companies accountable for making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, because 23andMe is an excellent case study for this. Their intention of what they started at doing was actually really, really wonderful. And where they've ended in their relatively short career lifespan is like really sad and was avoidable, in my opinion. Again, I'm not an expert by any means on that company, but just from like an outside party, it was like the intention, right, was to get people together, especially for so many success stories of people that were maybe like separated from their families and were able to reunite because of this thing. And that's like really, really wonderful. That's like a really great data point. But on the other hand, creating guardrails and safeties for consumers to making sure that companies have thought about what's the worst case scenario, I think is really important. And I think as consumers, right, we need to start being like, hey, you just sent my full social security number in email. Like, that's not okay. Next time, like, I will physically come to your office and pick it up. Like, I don't want to risk you sending it because I don't think I trust you anymore.
Yeah. And it's unfortunately the world we live in now, is we have to think about things in that way. We can't assume that any platform is going to be a safe one. Even
Which sucks.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially
it really does.
A lot of these things are super cool, and we've learned so much from these amazing technologies. Like, you and I are both very technology friendly, so we're definitely not. At least I know
I've been
I'm a little
a
too
big fan
tool
of
heavy.
one technology I have been a big fan of, because they've been very transparent and have been very clear about what they want, is Signal. So it's a messaging app. It's less of a social media app and more of a messaging app, more like iMessage, but it does offer some social media type of features. And they've been very clear about why they exist, what their purpose is. They're managed as a foundation, so they're not going after a big profit margin. They're not looking for shareholder value and all the other things that lead to enshittification. And they are partially funded by donations. And so I made sure that, hey, I really like this tool. I find it very effective. I like what you're doing. I'm going to give a weekly or monthly donation towards that. You look at things like the social media platforms, and I'll call it Mastodon here is one that I've been on quite a bit lately, that when they develop their platform, and it's all open source, it's decentralized, so there are a bunch of different servers that all work together, federate together to be able to talk across different servers. One of the things that they were very clear about is the fact that what we're used to as direct messages or private messages on other social media platforms are not private. They're not designed to be secrets. Don't talk about secret things. Go on another platform that's designed for that. These are messages that are targeted to a specific group of individuals, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be super secret. And I really find that refreshing to say, hey, this is not a place that you should talk about things that you don't want other people to know about, because it has the potential to leak. And we should think about that in every single platform that doesn't tell us otherwise. So a lot of people do things on, Facebook Messenger or, other direct messages on other sites. Those types of things are on somebody else's platform. Somebody else has access to that data, unless they're explicitly telling you that it's direct person to person. In other words, it doesn't hit one of their servers, or that they're encrypting that data and throwing it, into whatever systems they have so that nobody else can get to them other than you. Those are things that, if you're going to transfer digital information, those are the things that you need to think about. Well,
and it's definitely another conversation we're going to have, because the move to start encrypting everything is actually very consumer friendly. Because it makes it harder for technology well, okay, maybe not, but I'll explain why I just added that additive for a second. But
yes, but no.
the intention of you and I sending messages that are encrypted is better because for the two of us, we're not like, we're literally colleagues. So we're saying, hey, when are we meeting next, right? And we're using a platform of our choosing to be like, hey, when are we scheduling this meeting, whatever. But that being encrypted is great because it adds an additional layer of protection over those messages, because like we don't want somebody to join one of our meetings unexpectedly. But we're not like, we're using it in a very specific context. But when we're talking about what happens when things are so encrypted that it makes it really hard for regulators or law enforcement to get access to messages that could be harming vulnerable communities. And it ties into the conversation that we've been having about social media. I have a very, very wonderful and close contact that I'm hopeful we'll be able to bring onto the podcast to talk about it from an advocacy perspective about children's privacy and why advocates are actually potentially saying we don't want encryption. And it's interesting because there's a liability discussion that's also being had, which is where that additive came from for me, where if it's encrypted, there's less liability on the companies that are actually hosting the platforms. Potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a tough one. I'm generally a fan of no backdoors and encryption, but the problem ends up being is that on either side of it, there's abuse. And it's a matter of which side of the abuse we want to err on. Do we want to err on the side of individual humans having autonomy and being able to do things and have their own privacy? Or do we want to err on the being able to protect those that will be using those platforms and being abused on them or being taken advantage of, or, human trafficking being coordinated on? So there's no right answer to that. That's unfortunately something society's got to hammer out, and it's, democracy is messy type of a situation for sure.
Yeah, and again, it'll be conversations that we're having, and you and I, we don't have an answer for this. I want to make that super clear to the audience that we're actively trying to learn with the industry on how we're going to handle this, because I see there being huge value of making sure that messaging is encrypted because it might actually help people stay safer online. But there is also another conversation related to vulnerable communities, specifically like children, and individuals that might not have the same type of background that you and I do, of how are they using these platforms in a safe way, and what happens if somebody is getting bullied online or somebody is holding something against somebody in these private channels that are really hard to start opening up for legitimate law enforcement reasons. And so, these are conversations I think we're going to continue to have in this space, where we're actively learning. We're not necessarily saying that one way is right or one way is the other. I will say that if Signal ever wants to come talk to us about their platform, we would happily invite them, because I think you and I are both big fans of their platform. And, we're considering how could we build a community with our socializing security listeners of how could we have like a Signal community group. So maybe we could bring them on in a future episode and ask for their advice on how to establish community with listeners, because that's really what we're here to do. We're really here to be social about security and also learn from one another. And, we're actively saying like, hi, we are experts in our field, but actively learning and growing with the community and the industry. And that means we just want to learn from other people, and we want to hear from even non-technology people and just professionals about how these things touch their lives, because it impacts every single one of us.
Yeah. And it's a dark conversation, as I keep realizing as I keep going into dark places on this, because it is scary, and it is something I think about a lot, and the more I think about it, the scarier it gets. We're not here to play fear mongers. We're not here to play FUD. We're here to get down to, how can we deal with it as best we can? And sometimes you won't be able to entirely remove the threats. It's not entirely safe to walk outside of your house. It's not entirely safe to stay inside your house all the time. That's just the nature of life, I guess.
I can end with an anecdote that made me feel really creepy, but where I live, they have like pretty public records on like ownership of property, which is pretty common in the United States, right? I'm not totally sure how it is around the world, but because of issues with land disputes and title and so many legal discussions related around property ownership, there are a lot of regulations in place, right, that make sure that it's land records, ownership, like for homes, is very public information, right? It's public record because people want to make sure that someone's not accidentally like trying to steal your land, right? That's the intention behind a lot of these things. But so these things are public. It's part of your digital footprint. I am walking outside and my husband and I love to just like walk around and look at other houses and lots and see and like dream. And that's I think a very common thing that we all do with scrolling on Zillow and all that kind of stuff. But so there's a lot that, my family has been like, oh, beautiful lot, like beautiful lake view and gorgeous. And, we've been like, oh, one day we're going to buy a lot like that or whatever. And you're dreaming. And all of a sudden there's a pole now that they're going to probably build. Because we have like looked at this lot or whatever, just for fun, being like, oh, how much would something like, you're just like dreaming. But because those things are public record, I know their names because that isn't anonymous. And so suddenly I'm walking my dog the other day and they're out there like taking photos of their lot and they're dreaming about their dream home. And I'm so excited for them. And I'm like, I know so much about those people and they know nothing about me. And that made me feel really creepy because I was like, oh my God, I like know their names. I know where they live because that is public record. There's ways that you can protect that, and we can definitely bring in experts to help us learn how to do that together as a group because you can create systems to make those types of things more private. But again, that's part of the digital footprint. It's that's what I mean in the sense that I felt so bad that I was like, oh, I know their names. I know where they live. Yeah. I know how much they paid for their house. Like, well, I don't need to know that. I don't need to know that.
I've definitely done the same thing. You can track people. I mean, it's not that hard to find out who people are, where they've lived in the past, and then start looking at county real estate records and whatnot. And it does feel creepy. And sometimes I find myself doing it. I'm like, I don't need to know this. I should not be looking it up. But there is a public good to having that out there. And that's a risk as a society that we take. But at the same time, if part of getting credit is showing past addresses, again, not bad by itself, but as a chain of different things that you need to do something in the society, it can be problematic.
Yes. As your action item this week to all of our listeners, please go ahead and look into that major box store that we all order stuff from. I will say this again. Look at all of the mailing addresses that they have and all the old credit cards that you haven't deleted. Go ahead and just in your accounts, clean them up. Do it one by one. Yep. It's a small thing, and think about us when you do it, and we'll be very proud of you. We don't want to know what you deleted. We don't want any of your personal information, but we want to know that you took security seriously and that you were looking at your online accounts and we're just actively just cleaning them up, doing a little bit of spring cleaning. And then your socializing security hosts will be very proud of you this week.
Yes, gold star from us.
It's gold star. Gold star. Okay. I think we're rounding out our episode today. I think we're going to continue to have conversations, especially with some of the experts that I think we name dropped. I'm hopeful that maybe we could get somebody from like in real estate, or ideally amazing if it was a lawyer, but we have to be really careful about making sure that people aren't giving legal advice on our podcast. So we will try our best to bring in some really awesome speakers to help us learn with you on these topics.
Yep, excited to dive into those types of conversations for sure. We'd love to hear your ideas of other topics that you'd like to hear about. If you want us to go deeper into anything, if you have thoughts to add to these, we're going to be churning through a lot of different things. So love to hear any ideas anybody has. And if you're interested in becoming part of a broader community around our podcast, we'd love to hear your ideas around that too, because we'd love to have continuous conversations on these topics. These are not one and done. These are obviously things that we have to deal with on a constant basis. So want to make this topic approachable, want to make it easy, want to make it, the kind of thing that we can share with our grandparents to help them get through and not get spoofed by all this craziness that's going on.
Yeah, and then if anybody in our listeners knows any contacts at Signal who might want to talk to us about what they do and their philosophy, we would really love an introduction. So thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Signal or anybody in this field, notable companies, we'd love to learn from them along with everybody that's listening. So,
Especially the privacy-minded
Cool. Well,
companies
we
of the
appreciate
world.
yes, those that are doing it for real, not just using it as a thing that they tout and don't actually do.
All right, we'll see you in a future episode.
Yep. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.